Look at this picture. What do you see, other than primitive drawing and an utter lack of talent? What do you see? Let's just take this at face value and imagine that we're looking at something that's real. You could say, looking at this image, that you are looking at an anthill. And you'd be right. What is depicted in this image is an anthill. On the other hand, you could argue that you are looking at a bunch of ants crawling on a hill. And again, you would be right. You would be looking at a bunch of ants crawling on a hill. Both of these observations are essentially correct at the level that you're looking at. And that is what people who get themselves caught up in the whole objective and subjective dichotomy, that's what these people cannot get their head around. That is where these people stumble and fall. On the one hand, you have the people who think that there is an objective reality, and that whatever you're looking at there, it is what it is. It is this one thing, and that's what it is. You cannot deny its true essence, so to speak, its absolute identity as something or another. People reject that because it is simply not true, as I already pointed out earlier, because you could say that you're looking at an anthill, or you could say you're looking at individual ants crawling on a hill. You see, what people who are wedded to this idea of an objective reality think is that once you've rejected the notion of an objective reality, you must then therefore, and this is a dichotomous mind in action, you must therefore be subjective. So it is a free-for-all, a crazy free-for-all where everybody can just make of reality whatever they like. That is of course not true either, because, like I said at the start of this video, you are looking at an anthill. If you made that observation, your observation would be correct, and equally, if you made the observation that you were looking at ants on a hill, your observation would still be correct. These are the sort of observations that you can share with other people, and you can come to an agreement that with somebody else that you're looking at an anthill, or that you're looking at ants on a hill. So what is going on here? The thing that people with a dichotomous mind lose sight of is that what is going on here, the way you're looking at this thing, is at a number of different levels. And I've chosen the image of an anthill quite deliberately, because if you aren't aware of this yet, if you haven't heard of this before, I would suggest you read a book called Gödel, Escher and Bach, written by Douglas Hofstadter, in which this very example is raised of an anthill. Basically, the anthill is presented as a singular entity, and it has created a personality by the interaction of all the ants within the anthill. That is not entirely a crazy notion, because in the end that is exactly how we produce our personalities, as the result of interactions of individual neurons that are, each neuron on its own, much less sophisticated and much less intelligent than an ant would be. But of course, there are billions and billions of them, and there are billions and billions and billions of connections between all the neurons, which in all its interaction, from all its interaction emerges the personality of you as an individual. And in a similar vein, you could imagine that if insect societies were to progress further on this road, that an insect society such as an anthill could become an individual in its own right. And in the book In Gödel Escherbach, Douglas Hofstadter presents this as the anthill itself entering into a conversation with somebody, and at some point the anthill actually offers to the people that it is in conversation with a few ants for their delight and delectation, because they're quite juicy and tasty and nutritious. Upon which the person responding to the anthill replies in shock, saying, "How can you sacrifice the ants that make up your body?" But think about it. Are you in any way concerned about the millions of cells that die in your body every day? The millions of skin cells that keep on falling by the wayside, that would allow a tracker dog track you down if you were ever trying to escape from the law, for example. No, because your perspective of yourself, your view of yourself, is at the level of you as an individual. But taking us back to the anthill, if you were an individual ant living in an anthill, and you were sacrificed for the good of the colony, if you had the mental capacity to feel a sense of identity, you would still obviously suffer that personal loss of sacrificing yourself for the good of the colony. From the ant's perspective, this is a personal tragedy, and even though it might feel compelled by some instinct that's stronger than its own instinct for self-preservation to sacrifice itself for the good of the colony, it would still personally look at the world from its own personal perspective. From the perspective of an ant, there is no anthill. It is just an individual doing what it feels it has to do, what it feels compelled to do, for its own personal reasons. The anthill, of course, on the other hand, looks at this from a completely different perspective and isn't even aware of the individual ant, just like you are not even aware of the individual neuron that fires in your brain to make the thoughts that you think all day. And this is the level at which there is no objective reality. Everything that you observe in the world around you is brought into existence by you observing it. Not in the sense that there would be nothing there if you weren't looking. This isn't La La Land. But an anthill is only an anthill because you decide to look at the scene in front of you at a certain level. You look at the scene in front of you at a different level and you will see something different. None of the things are objectively there. All these things exist in an interaction between you and the environment. And of course both you and the environment are an integral part of reality as a whole. Neither can be extracted, neither can be separated out to be studied in separation from the rest of reality. That is how there is no objective reality, and in that sense only. The dichotomous thinking that leads those who are wedded to this notion of an objective reality to go ballistic over the idea that those who reject the idea are off into a subjective La La Land is a figment of their own imagination. With reality, it has nothing to do whatsoever.